Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Michael Greeno. I am the owner of Pragmatic Strength. I'm here to talk to you today with the help of BarPath. We're going to, and some of the tools I built in BarPath to talk about a system that I created in the past. It's not really a system. It's more or less, it's how you basically use RPE and velocity together to basically make the most effective system you can with both tools at the same time. The reality of it is the more we understand about RPE, the more we understand about velocity, the more we understand about training systems and training methodologies, the more we understand that each one of them have their own cruxes and their own strengths and their own weaknesses, right? And the reality of it is the RPE and velocity are no different, right? RP in itself is a very subjective system. It's got a lot of room for interpretation. It is a very wide net, right? That's distilled down to very small nets, right? It is the rate of perceived exertion. Perceived is a very subjective term because everyone's perception could be different. Your own perception could be skewed due to ego, lack of honesty, understanding, etc., right? Whereas someone else's perceived like exertion of what you just did can be completely different because of honesty, not being truthful, being too skewed of what they've seen or something to that effect, right? Their past biases. So that is why we have the nines and the 9.5s and whatever. It's like we have a number because we have a general vicinity of what that's supposed to look at, right? Think of a person who's trying to measure off 30 yards and they use it with their feet, right? They just kind of walk it off, right? Because they have a good general idea of like what 30 feet looks like. So they like walk it off with their feet, right? And they'll get pretty close. I mean, they'll get within a couple feet probably if they're pretty good at it. Um, as opposed to velocity where it they literally just measured out with a tape measure, right? It's absolute. Like there's actually a measurable thing, and that actual tape measure measures it to the exact like foot, right? And that's the difference between the minutiae, right? And one could argue that with RPE, that is the tradesman's and the master's way of understanding someone's exertion or understanding someone's performance is by having a very skilled perception of how to do this effectively, right? Whereas velocity is very can be a crutch because if you rely too much on your tools, then what are you really practicing, right? Because in a meet we can't use velocity meters, right? We have to trust our eyes and we have to be able to trust that okay, it's like okay, cool, our opener looked like an RP9, that's not good, right? Whereas if you were to use a velocity meter and you know exactly to the T like what their velocity targets are, then you have a pretty darn good understanding, right? So RPE is kind of like a dartboard, right, or a bullseye, or an archery, target, right? It's a very wide, broad thing. You can still hit the target. It's whether or not how close you get to the bullseye, right? So accuracy is key, and honesty within your own abilities is key. So if we sit here and we go over to velocity, however, this is my velocity chart, and I'll talk about some stuff here in a second. But the one thing about velocity is if RPE is the target with the range of values and points, velocity is the arrow in relation to that, or the bullseye, or the indicators and the markings of how close you are to the bullseye, right? It takes a different approach, right? And that entire approach hinges off of one value and one value only, and that is your MVT. Even to the degree that your estimated 1 rep max is not that important. And if you look at a lot of velocity based systems, the weight is irrelevant. The weight is just a guiding thing. Our goal is to push a to hit and say, hey, your goal today is to hit your MVT, which is 0.13, right? So for me, 0.13 is my deadlift max velocity target, right? And say, hey, go give me a 0.13, whatever that is. That could be 650, that could be 551, 552, 503, 398. Could be a number of things based on my fatigue and different parameters and stuff like that. But you're told to hit an absolute value. It says, hey, where RPE is like, hey, go hit this range, go hit the outer left, go hit the target in as close to the bullseye as possible. This is, hey, go hit the bullseye dead on, right? Or go hit as close to the bullseye as humanly possible and keep going until you do, right? It's a very narrow net. If RP is here, velocity is here. Shoot small, miss small type of deal. So the incrementalization and the granularization is absolutely effective. And the reality of it is velocity more effective than RPE? Absolutely. Without a doubt, 100%, the accuracy of velocity cannot be denied that it is better and vastly more superior than RPE. And that's just the truth because you have an absolute value. If you have your MVT 100% understood and you know that you are on average at 0.13, and what MVT is your max velocity target. That is your RPE 10 in relation. In other words, I cannot do any more than this. If this goes down to 0.12, I miss the weight. This is the slowest it can move for me to still complete the lift. That is what this is. For squat, it's 0.19. For bench, it's around 0.18 for me. But if you notice, like when we look at this velocity chart, it changes. Like you see a yellow, brown, red, dark red. If I were to sit here and be a more dynamic lifter and say, hey, I move faster, but I kind of gas out quicker, you're going to notice like it turns green. And I start seeing I'm a more dynamic lifter. I don't grind. I'm not a grinder, right? If I'm a faster person, I don't grind as much. In other words, I move really quick and then I just don't, right? As opposed to here with my true actual, I'm not a very dynamic lifter, but I have a very, very, very high propensity to grind. I can grind a deadlift very, very, very well, right? You know, if I were to change context and put this in the bench, it does the same thing, right? I have a very, very high. So if I'm moving at a 0.17, I'm very, very fast for a very long time and I move really well, but I don't have a very good ability to grind. This is actually extremely accurate. I don't have a very strong ability to grind. I'll lose my positioning. I'll push really hard and I'll get to those points and I'll miss groove and I'll have downward motion. This is pretty accurate, right? Changes just ever so slightly, but squat, same premise, right? If I'm a 0.3 max target velocity on this, like I don't grind. I'm fast or I'm kind of and I slow off and I'm not, right? If you're sitting here, if your max target velocity is saying you just don't grind. There's no max effort in you whatsoever. You're either that. This is actually a very, very similar to Devontae Lewis. So if you think about Devontae, this is actually extremely accurate. He can move 1032 and like 1030, 1032 at 0.3, 0.7. He's hitting like 850, 900, etc. in like the 0.5s and 0.6s. And then all of a sudden it just starts dropping down. Like he moves incredibly quick, right? I think his right around 0.24. He'll start to fail, right? But like this is like you start looking at this, he's extremely quick. Like he's moving 500 pounds at almost a meter per second, right? So when you put that in perspective and you understand that max velocity target, you understand really, really, really quickly what your ability is at a very incremental level. You understand incredibly quick, like what you're capable of and what you're not. You learn your actualities. And that's where the next term comes in. You no longer are abiding by, when you combine the two systems with velocity and RPE, you no longer have a perceived value. You have an actual or an absolute value. Thus, you have a RAE value. Your RAE value is rate of absolute or actual exertion, right? So this turns into something completely different because you're using a multi-factored approach and says, hey, I know this, and I know, I'm going to achieve this. I need you to I need you to go hit a 9 today for a set of 5, right? Chances are I'm going to go to like 545, right? I'm going to go to 245 kilos. And it's probably going to be right around a 0.32. But understand like the variation here. I built this chart to be incredibly incremental. So the difference between a 9.5 and a 9 is literally 0.2 meters per second, or 0.15 in some cases. Understand the bullseye is incredibly small, and this number is no longer an actual value that's like meant to be perceived. It's an absolute value. You look at this chart and say, if this is 100% correct and you're completely fresh and you strip yourself of all fatigue and values and things like that, understand that this is probably the purest metric your purest metric you can have, because that is an absolute value. Chances are, if you run the statistics on this and you have say, hey, I want a 5 reps at 9, and you had them do it 10 times, chances are they would be between 552 and 536. They would be between 540 and 540, probably 545, 9 times out of 10. And the reason for that is because the two correlating values, it gives you your bullseye, and it gives you your target, and it centers your bullseye. And then it puts it on guardrails and says, hey, here's your bullseye. Here's your outer target, your outer ring, your inner ring, here's your outer ring, and things like that. So for a skilled RPE person, you just gave them essentially a perfect thing to shoot at, right? You gave them the absolute value. There's nothing to interpret at that point. There's nothing to be scared of. There's nothing to be misunderstood. The number speaks for itself, right? So how does this work in terms of programming, right? Well, it's actually quite simple. As coaches, our job is to understand our people's training maxes. Our job, if we are working with them in a velocity-based system, our job is to understand this value here. Our RAE value is given to us automatically by understanding this. You can validate yourself and you can make your tweaks based upon people's fatigue curves and stuff. Their RAE values are irrelevant at this point. They may have a standard deviation in their MVT based upon the weeks that they are and how much fatigue they have. I might grind at a 0.13 when I'm perfectly healthy. I might grind at a 0.15 when I'm fatigued. Right? So you understand those particular things. But having having a couple extra metrics with velocity helps you understand the target, right? So I can sit here with 100% confidence and say, I'm going to do a set at I'm literally going to do a set at 5. I know that I'm probably going to do like 511, 515, 510, somewhere right around there. You can kind of round the kilos or the pounds or whatever, right? So, which one's more important? Which one's better, right? I don't think that's the question that we ask. It's why are we using RPE and why are we using velocity by themselves? Well, velocity is the power bar on all three with a combo rack system, right? A lot of gyms have them. Most gyms have a standard power bar. Most gyms have freedom unit plates or just really basic non-calibrated plates, right? Most gyms have, the essentials. And that's what RPE is. RPE is the essentials. It may not be pretty. It may be old and it may be old school and it may be the, you know, the tried and true way, but at the end of the day, this is a power bar and some good old fashioned uncalibrated plate, right? RAE values in this hybrid system is like having an Alico bar with calibrated plates on an Alico combo rack and having all the bells and whistles and having all the competitive advantage you would ever have. It sets you up in the most absolute way that you are going to practice on your meet day, right? It sets you up with the entire actuality of everything you're doing. You might as well be wearing your singlet that day, wearing all your competition gear, because this is the actuality of what you're actually doing. This is the Cadillac of that system. This is, you know, you can think of velocity based training as kind of the in between of that, right? It's having a deadlift bar and a squat bar, right? It's kind of having specialty bars on everything so you optimize the efficacy of each individual thing. Whereas RPE is kind of just that basic system that's meant to gauge things and it's not fancy. Velocity's fancy. It's got all extra bells and whistles that's meant to help you kind of help some stuff. But when you mix that together, it's a way of old school fancy. It's taking a classic car and dropping a new engine in it and new suspension and modern technology into it and making an old classic new and in such a credible way. And we do that habitually all the time. With a lot of cars that are out today and a lot of things that are out today, that's what we do. 9 times out of 10, aesthetic always goes backwards, right? So when you think about this and you think about what I call a RAE value, you guys may not like that, but I do, because you have to reframe this. You can no longer call this a perception because it's not. It's an actuality. It's an absolute. It's more of an actuality than an absolute. Very few things are absolute in this world. But now you also have to the only capture this is standard deviation, right? Standard deviation rules the world. But the reality of it is that your MVT is always going to flux, probably by point 0.2, point 0.3, depending on your fatigue value, right? It's never going to be like, oh, I'm just not strong today, so it's going to be my MVT is 0.3 or 0.23. No, it's going to be probably somewhere between 0.13, 0.16, 0.15, right? And that might change your numbers a little bit. So if I'm looking for a triple at RPE 7, 544 is kind of that's what it is if I'm feeling good. If I'm not feeling good, when you look at those things, 544 at a triple, it doesn't change much. The numbers are going to change, but you're not seeing the value change. right? You're still going to do it. It's just going to be slower. That number doesn't start to change until it like really, really starts to like push, right? Like you start seeing like your effort values push, right? That's why it's important. See, because like I'm getting closer to grinding that. Like that's you start getting into your grinding zones, right? It gets less grindy. That's it, right? This is more of that maximum strength zone as opposed to the absolute strength and grinding zone. And that's what's incredibly important to understand. You're going to, as the closer you get to these areas, the closer you're going to incur more fatigue. The more here is less fatigue. This is not your submax zone. Your submax zone sits right here in between the back end of this. This is more of like your actual max effort zone, is what this is. This is more than max effort. This is beyond max effort to the point of like this is absolute effort, right? Absolute strength is more like the max effort zone. You start getting right here. That's kind of that golden zone that you want to achieve if you're doing max effort method. So with that said, RAE, rate of absolute or actual exertion, that is the method. That is the method that I use for my people who use velocity meters. I understand their MVT. I understand they're estimated in their training maxes, and then I use my knowledge of RPE and I grind them all up together and I make a nice little soup. And what you see is basically, RAE instead of RPE. Now, is this a better system? Some would say it's more complicated, but for a master level coach who wants to min max their people. So if you are working with the top 1% of the 1% of the sport where 2.5 kilos or matter, and you have a person who is you're trying to do the absolute cusp of what this sport has to offer, threading needles like this become incredibly important, right? Min maxing and to get every little pound of potential out of someone becomes incredibly important. For the average person, the average intermediate, lower intermediate to novice, this is overkill. And it can be overkill. It can be a very fun way of training and a very engaging way of training. You can get a cheap velocity meter for a couple $100, hook it up to your stuff, and you really will always, in this system, I will say this, in this system, you should never need a deload. In this system, you'll never need a deload. And the reason why you'll never need a deload is because your coach will, if they do this system correctly, they will understand your pitfalls and where to put you and where to keep you in the zones as you go. You will never, unless the coach legitimately just disregards everything that you're doing, or you physically need one yourself because mentally you just can't take it anymore. You should never need a deload in a RAE system. And the reason why that is you already have your absolute targets. Understanding your recovery bands is going to be absolutely 100% easier than RPE. There is no overshooting and there is no undershooting, right? There simply just is, right? And that's a very hard concept for a lot of people to understand, is that they see the number, they're like, well, what if I can't do that? It's like, well, if everything's dialed in, you should absolutely be able to do this without a problem. There is no open-ended, well, go find me a 9. Well, was that a 9? No. Yes. Well, it felt like a 9. Well, it's not a 9. A lot of people find out what's funny about this type of system is a lot of people find out that they're actually not moving as slow as they think they are. They're actually not performing to the level they think they are. They're like, I want a set of 3 at RPE 7 or a set at 7. And they find out really quickly that they get to 5'10" and they're like, man, that had to be it. I'm like, nope, you got like 30 more pounds to go. right? And it's indicative of that. It's like, oh, 0.38, and it's like all their numbers are accurate. It's like, nope, nope, go up. You got to go up. So, and that's the thing is what happens is people will habitually undershoot or they'll overshoot in an RPE system. It's usually the inverse. In a race system, most people will undershoot, realizing that this is a lot heavier than what they thought they were going to go. And the reality is they're actually faster or they're stronger than they think. In an RPE system, people think they are stronger than what they think, and they typically overshoot, and they end up in this area over here in the absolute strength place before they end up over here, right? A race system athlete will end up over here in closer to the strength speed zone, where an actual RPE athlete will end up more in the grinding and absolute strength zone. And the reason why that is because ego and lack of perception is incredibly hard because it all starts feeling heavy at this point. But the reality of it is there's the sides of the fence, because of the accuracy, right? Overcorrection, undercorrection, hypercorrection, right? When you take away those things and have actual absolute values, you circumvent that. So, rate of actual exertion, RAE values, right? Instead of RPE. Now, if I hear someone talk about that, then I know that it came from me. It doesn't sound as cool as RPE, but so most people will still do RPE. But when you see someone is doing velocity based training and RPE together, chances are they're using a RAE system, and they're like, yeah, I did 519 at 8, at 0.35, right? Okay, cool. We'll understand that. So, programming is simple. Again, understanding your fatigue patterns, understanding your lifter patterns. This is available on BarPath. It's under the app section. To be a pro member, you have to be a pro member to use the MVT, but you can still play with this. But yeah, guys, I hope, if you have questions about programming and how you would program this, feel free to reach out. Happy to help any way I can. But yeah, is velocity a superior system? It is a system that works incredibly well in an incremental sense. But when it comes to, like I said, it is a very focused system that's very granular where, and I drew the comparison earlier. So is it a great system? It's a wonderful system. Does it work even better with RPE? RPE is a great system. Does it work great in conjunction with velocity? They are very good partners. And they are the missing link to each other to make these incredible and to create a brand new system and a brand new methodology that will absolutely keep you healthy. It'll keep you strong and it'll keep you moving in a very positive trajectory as long as you understand the fundamentals. Is it hyper complicated? Not really. You will spend more time if you understand the nuance of these systems and you put it all together. It'll save you more time than having to guess week in and week out, understanding your mismanaged RPE. I will say that. Anyways, have a good day, guys. Hope this helps. Hope you enjoy it. Peace.